All right, back at it we go. 33 minutes after the top of the hour, talking home improvement. It's time we bring in Ken Clark. He is the man behind Hardware and Building Supply. He's the editor-in-chief, knows the industry. We bring Ken on to kind of find out what's going on. And Ken, welcome again to At Home with Gary Sullivan. How you doing?
Doing great, Gary.
Great.
We're struggling through that stifling heat wave here in New Jersey.
Yeah,
it's
it is hot.
A lot of people talk about the weather, but very few do anything about it except for the air conditioning manufacturers.
Yeah,
they're in big demand.
Yes, they are. In fact, I had one on yesterday. We were talking about all the options and the new government regulations and on it goes. This is going to shock you, Ken, but it costs a little bit more up front, but the long-term savings is there.
I was watching the television news with my daughter yesterday, and the New York City anchor recommended that people living in New York keep their air conditioning unit at 78 degrees.
Yeah.
It's so hot. My daughter looked at me and laughed because she's cranking it. Cranking it upstairs. Maybe we can get in trouble for saying that, but they make air conditioners a lot better than they used to. I'll say that.
Well, yeah, and you bring up a good point. To be honest with you, I have mine. I would never, ever, ever had set my air conditioner at 77, 78 because I wouldn't be comfortable. It was always like at 72. But over the last few years, I started really experimenting as my bill continued to grow pretty significantly. And, of course, we all know that humidity plays a big role in the comfort of your home, too. So if you've got 77 degrees and your humidity is 45% in your home, I have found out after experimenting, I can be pretty comfortable. If I've got it set at 72 and my home humidity is at 60%, I can be still uncomfortable. So really, here's a couple tips for you, Ken. I'm going to give them to you because I brought this up.
I'm writing them down.
Yeah,
I'm writing them down.
One of the things, if you've got forced air in the air conditioner, you got it set. It doesn't matter what you got it set at. Let's say 75. And your humidity's in the 58%, 60%. If your fan is on, and it seems like that'd be a good idea. We'd be circulating the air, moving air would be cooler air, it'd be drier air. But when you have your air handler and the air conditioning on, you're pulling that moisture out of the air, and the coils in the air handling unit are dripping wet. And if you have your fan on, you're blowing all that stuff right back up in the air, right back up in the house. Now, I had an air conditioning guy tell me this about 3 years ago. I've been doing this show, and between home improvement and everything, I've been in this industry 50 years. I've never heard that. And my home humidity was running at about 58%. I went, I changed my fan mode on my thermostat when my air conditioner running to auto. And my humidity in my home dropped immediately. And I started moving my temperature up. And right now mine is set at 77. My indoor humidity is 45%. I'm extremely comfortable. And I've also done a couple of things, also like maybe shutting some of the vents off in the basement so more air could get to the first floor and the upstairs. So there's some playing around you can do to make that comfortable.
Well, that reminds me of the time I was in a very hot, sweltering high school classroom, and the teacher had a fan, just a regular electric fan, but instead of blowing the air toward the inside the classroom, he had the fan facing out, which I thought was counterintuitive, but he swore by it, and it sounds like he's reading the same articles that your expert has told you.
Yeah.
But a lot of these old houses, it's nice and cool on the main floor as you just described. But then at that sixth or seventh step up to the stairs, boy, it gets hot up there. It's hard to get that central air to work equally
Right.
on the second floor, main floor, and of course the
Well,
basement.
even in new
Always
builds,
cool.
there's a an allowable variance of almost 6 degrees from the first floor to the upstairs. But there are ways to correct that problem in new builds and also older homes. They have, wireless thermostats now that can be put upstairs, and they put air-powered dampers that are on a computer program,
Yes.
and the thermostats talk to each other. So they'll close
Yes.
dampers and open dampers, and if you got people living upstairs, that's a huge way to correct that problem. Of course, ceiling fans help, more insulation helps, but really redirecting where that coolness is needed is certainly the key, along with changing that filter. I wonder how many times I've said that over the years.
Well, my plan today is just to stay indoors and beat the heat. I know there are a lot of people in the industry, especially on the lumberyard side, the big home centers, who have to be outside, who have to load trucks.
Sure.
A shout out to them. That's a tough job, and I know the companies are trying to make it comfortable for them, but there's not a lot they can do other than supply water and big fans and lots of breaks.
Yeah. Speaking of lumber yards, how is the lumber channel doing right now? And has signs of or sizes of dimensional lumber shifted at all, or where's the whole wood industry at?
The lumber industry is really doing great, but here's the thing: it's not doing nearly as well as the lumber yards aren't doing nearly as well from a revenue perspective as they were in 2022, when it was just things were swimming. It was everyone was humming, and I was talking to one dealer from Ohio who said that things were so good back then that they kind of got into some lazy habits, some complacency set in, and here the lumber prices have gone down, and people have moved on to other investments after that stay at home. After COVID forced everyone to stay at home, the only option that they had money to spend was to their home.
You're breaking up a little bit.
Oh, well, I was just trying to say it's back to the sawmill. It's back nose to the grindstone for the lumberyard companies in 2024.
Right.
There's a lot of competition.
Yeah, I also I see that, or I've talked to people. I haven't really seen it. I have noticed that the remodeling industry, I think, is still doing well. Buildings kind of slowed down a little bit. At least that's the feel I get. I don't know if there's any truth in that, but it seems like the independents are getting maybe a little bit of the slice of pie back. Are you seeing any data that says that?
Well, there's what we're seeing most of all is consolidation. Big players acquiring independents.
Oh, okay.
And that's because independents are really, it's kind of a very local, it's a local game. Building supply. It's customers you go on trips with them. Families get together on the sales end and the purchasing end, and it's a really local game with lots of companies that have been doing it 100 years, and they're very desirable by a lot of the investment companies.
Yeah.
But the big are getting bigger. I think that's a key story that we're seeing across.
When you say big, you're talking about maybe chains of lumber yards, or are you just talking big boxes acquiring?
Let's see. Builders First Source is probably the number one lumberyard pro dealer company out there. They're heavily into the acquisition mode. Companies like USLBM are acquiring across Nation's Best down in Dallas, Texas. I'm forgetting a couple, I'm sure, but a lot of these companies are just Kodiak Building Partners up in Colorado. They're really active and looking for companies to expand.
And Ken, what kind of companies are they gobbling up? Is it like local young lumber yards? Is that what you're saying?
Well, they might not. They might bristle at the term gobbling up. They might describe it as partnering
yeah,
with.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah, it's a 2 or 3 location. For the most part, it's 2 or 3 location family business that has been courted for sometimes a year or longer, trying to get the company comfortable with turning over their baby.
Right.
So many ways.
Well, it's also their retirement. It's their baby, but it's their retirement.
True. And people are getting older. Those companies, there's a lot of gray hairs in the lumber business, Gary.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of gray hairs.
Yeah.
So
I feel that pain.
People are retiring.
You had made a note to me one time about safety in propane boiling.
Oh, well,
I only chuckle because, to be honest with you, the only time I was ever concerned about a propane tank is one time in the hardware store, a customer came in and wanted to paint his propane tank black. And I said, well, why do you want to paint your propane tank black? He goes, because that white thing sticks out on the grill. I got it on the patio. I said, well, you can't paint it black. That tank's gonna get too hot. Is there a boiling point? Well, I'm sure there's a boiling point for propane.
People don't. There is a boiling. That's my favorite question that I ask people when I'm out in the representing the company. What is the boiling point of propane? And people are always way too high. The actual answer, believe it or not, is negative 43.6 degrees Fahrenheit. That's when it starts to boil, and that's why you see so much thick metal. Those tanks are so strong. They've got to keep it cool in there, otherwise it's going to boil.
Well, painting it black ain't going to help. So don't paint it.
That's one of the tough questions we ask our new recruits at Hardware and Building Supply Dealer. We want them to know the boiling point of propane. We want them to know the actual dimensions of 2x8 dimensional lumber, which is another tough question.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, probably, Gary, it's 1.5 inches by 7.25 inches.
All right.
Those are some real stumpers. But we did use those when we hired a new editor very recently, and one of his first, speaking of safety, one of his first articles, you can check it out at HBSDealer.com, is about how safety mechanisms in table saws. And there's a big controversy going on about whether or not the Consumer Product Safety Commission is going to mandate that all table saws have the ability to detect skin and shut down, which is a great idea, right? It's safe, but it's going to add costs. And
it's always worth it when you lose a finger, though.
Well, exactly.
If you haven't had a problem, it costs too much. How's that? I knew the answer to that. Where's that stand right now?
Well, they're still debating.
Okay.
They're still debating.
Well,
so
you'll keep us on top of it, I'm sure.
Oh, thanks for that plug, Gary.
Yeah. No. Hey, where are we in recruiting in hardware stores and big box stores? Are we still finding knowledgeable people to work the stores?
That's they're great people. You go to any hardware store, Gary, of course.
I agree with you.
You'll see great folks. Normal, they're fantastic. It is a concern. There is a concern. When we talk to hardware store guys, they want. It's one of the first things. How do you recruit? And they're trying to get creative. They're usually way above minimum wage.
Right.
We've seen a lot of companies turn to employee stock ownership plans to kind of incent and make it more than just a job and make it more of a career. But it's an issue we want to encourage folks to consider it as a career, whether it's building materials or hardware. Yeah. There's some good jobs out there.
Well, I'll tell you too, if you're an older person too, and you've your main career's kind of coming to an end, it's a great way as a part-time job. Also, a lot of those folks are very knowledgeable. Been around the track before, and a great resource of knowledge there too. Ken, I got to scoot. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time and updating us on what's going on in the hardware and building supply business. We'll continue. You're at home with Gary Sullivan.